So the first question is you're far from home. It's kind of a delicate logistic situation, and at times this counter-piracy mission seems like it might be kind of tedious. So how do you approach those challenges from a commander's perspective? And if those aren't the challenges, correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure. I'll get to the logistics in a second, but first and foremost is making sure that people stay focused on the mission. I mean, we get trained up on all sorts of missions during the workup cycle, and very little of it had to deal with counter-piracy. I mean, you do VBSS boardings and stuff like that, but you have strike missions, air missions. We do those a lot, but you don't do a lot of counter-piracy. And so now that we've gotten out here, we've got our feet wet for a couple of months, trying to keep people focused on the mission at hand, which is, like I said, it can be tedious. And so sometimes the fact that they're not chasing people down and firing guns, you can lose sight of the fact that you are making an impact out here. I mean, Commodore Chick yesterday had mentioned that over the course of the same period of time last year, there was 17 pirated vessels, and this year there's only been one. Well, that means that we're making an impact collectively, not just Donald Cook, but everybody out here. And so trying to push that message out to the crew to keep them motivated that, hey, even though we're not shooting guns and chasing folks down every day, they still have to be attentive on their game, monitoring their radars, monitoring their comm circuits, have the VBSS team ready to go at a moment's notice, and so let them know this is a serious mission. And even though it can be tedious, things can change just like that, and you have to be ready at all times, and so you can't get complacent. The other thing, though, is trying to maintain some sort of, one of my biggest challenges is trying to keep people motivated when it's almost like Groundhog Day. Every day is the same, you know. And so we try to change things up a bit, whether it's morale-type activities, authorizing different uniforms, special ball cap, Red Sox hat, whatever they want to wear, MWR games, swim call, we've done that, all sorts of things to try to make every day not the same, to where people, one of the other things we've done is sailor phones, where people can call home. Email. When I first came in, there was no email. Everybody can email all times of the day. We show movies a lot, to where if you're not on watch and you don't need to be in your rack, if you want to watch a movie or you want to watch a few of the TV channels we have satellite, you know, you can keep track of CNN or Fox News or whatever. And so there's different outlets to where people can kind of maintain their sanity, because 15 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot that you could do. So that's one of my biggest challenges as a commander, is to try to keep everybody focused, but keep them all motivated as well, even though, like you said, it can be really tedious out here when you don't see anything for days on end sometimes.
But how about the logistics part?
Yeah, the logistics side of it has been a challenge, because there's not a whole lot. I mean, Djibouti is probably one of our best logistics ports, but we also get a lot of good support from the military Sea Lift Command ships out here. So we usually hit them up every week or 10 days or something like that, and that's been fantastic. Even though it takes a lot of coordination from my operations officer and supply officer to kind of make sure all this takes place, we're at the right place in the right time, we really haven't had any problems with as far as getting fuel, getting food, getting mail. And so you know, it does take a lot of coordination, but we've gotten a little low in food sometimes, but we haven't gotten really low on fuel because we've been hitting the oilers regularly. But the biggest problem with it is trying to, for example, get people ashore. Sometimes you have to send people ashore for emergency leave, or you get new sailors showing up, and there's no place to really do that other than Djibouti, pretty much, because depending on if they have a passport, you know, it's very tough to fly people out of places like Muscat or something like that. So that's been a challenge. But once again, I have a first-class petty officer who's been handling all the movement of people, and she's done a beautiful job. And the delay for people getting either home or getting to the ship has been very small due to the initiative of, you know, my supply officer, my operations officer, and that's Y&1.
Is that Gil?
Gil, absolutely. Right. And she's on loan. She's not even mine. I had to borrow her from USS Porter because I was gapped in that billet. So she found out a week before we were sailing that she was going to be deploying with us, and you'd never know she wasn't one of my crew members, because she's given everything she's got and done a beautiful job. So the logistics it's a challenge, but it hasn't been so bad to where I think this is probably the most challenging AOR logistically there is. I mean, up in the NAG, I think it's a lot better than it is down here, but it is because it is. The ports are somewhat less developed down here, and there's less infrastructure. You rely a whole lot on those military Sea Lift Command ships, and they've been very responsive to us. And it was probably a lot due to my operations officer being so persistent in making sure that we don't take no for an answer. You know, we're going to find a way to join up with the oiler to get the food, to get the stores, to get the mail. So.
Does the counter-piracy mission force the crew to stretch outside of their comfort zone in any way?
I think to some extent, just because in the workup cycle there really was no discussion given the counter-piracy. I mean, we did approach visits and training of on that sort of mission, but as far as the potential of sending your boarding team up to a skiff or a dhow and them firing on you, I mean, that's a legitimate possibility every time they make an approach visit. And so that's not something that they really train you on. I mean, they train you on compliant boarding and non-compliant boardings, but usually if there's the possibility that they're going to shoot back at you, we're not normally going to send somebody over there. And you don't know what to expect with the pirates because they look like fishermen. You get over there, they're not fishermen.
Right.
And so, yeah, I would say in that respect, it is a little bit outside your comfort zone, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. We haven't done that many boardings or approaches because we just haven't seen that much activity. But even the ones that we've done, there was just an exponential improvement between the first time they did it and the second time they did it. The folks in combat that are making the radio calls to the different merchants and the dhows, they're getting more comfortable with stepping through all their pre-planned responses. So I think that the more time that you spend out here, the more comfortable you are. We also got some great turnover from some of the other ships. We relieved USS Laboon, and so we got a great turnover from her. USS Halliburton had been out here for some time doing this, so when we got out here, we kind of knew what the mission was due to all the lessons learned, so there weren't really any surprises.
Actually, I want to add something. I was a little bit surprised that there wasn't a Somali interpreter on board. What happens if you have to interact with the fishermen or pirates and you don't speak the language?
That's a great point. We had a Somali interpreter for a period of time. There's not that many of them.
Right.
NAVCENT or Fifth Fleet controls most of those, and high demand, unfortunately, no low number of assets. So we had one for about a month, and then he was called off to go do another mission. And so, just so happens during that period of time, we did a couple of approach visits on the Somali coast, and we didn't have an interpreter. Fortunately, there was at least one crew member on each of the skiffs that spoke very limited English, but through a lot of hand gesturing by my boarding officer, was able to, I think, it looked like, get the message to him as far as, have you seen any pirate houses, things of that nature, and oh, houses, yeah, and kind of get that, communicate with them using some very primitive hand gestures sometimes. But it certainly is not ideal. It'd be great if you had an interpreter on board for every time you made a call on bridge to bridge or every time you sent your BBSS team over. You just don't have that luxury right now.
And then you have an interpreter sitting on the ship for weeks at a time doing not very much.
We had that where we had him on board for the whole, pretty much the month he was here, where it just so happens that maybe it was during Ramadan, it was during the monsoon season, there just wasn't a whole lot of activity out here. And so he made a couple of call-ups and was very helpful for the few things that we needed him for, but he certainly wasn't overtasked during that period of time.
Right. So out here we have some 40 warships from 3 different international organizations and lots of countries acting independently, so you've got just a whole lot of diverse naval activity out here. From your perspective, what's it like interacting with all of these different commanding officers and all these different organizations? What does it look like from your level?
Well, really, a lot of it is coordinated for Donald Cook from the Standing NATO Maritime Group 2 level. There's not been a lot of interaction myself between the other units, even within our own Standing NATO Maritime Group. I've exchanged emails with the COs of the other ships, but ordinarily we're operating in it's a pretty large body of water out here, and even though you're right next to them on the grid, they may be 80 miles away. And so every once in a while you'll get a glimpse of them as they're transiting perhaps, but there's no visits so far. And so a lot of the coordination is done by Standing NATO Maritime Group 2, Commodore Chick and his staff. So in the past, this mission, the Standing NATO Maritime Group, usually operating in the Med, there was a whole lot of coalition building, pulling into ports, doing multinational exercises, some social events that really built strong bonds between the different navies, the different COs. Due to this mission and the fact that we're underway a whole lot, that hasn't happened, and that is a change from the previous deployments that I've done with NATO. The op tempo is so high because you have such a large body of water, and for us, a handful of ships for NATO, to where the op tempo is so high to where we're not pulling into ports together. Not only that, but some of these ports can't afford, they don't have the space to have 3, 4, 6 ships pull into where you can go make a call on the different COs and share some thoughts. Pretty much it's all done by email.
Would that kind of interaction even be useful?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, you could still do it via email. Years ago, once again, before email came up, it was very hard. I mean, you could do it through message traffic, but that's sometimes not very efficient. But absolutely, the sharing of ideas when you pull into port, I mean, I think that can be invaluable. Things that they have seen, different techniques and tactics that they've used that maybe you can adopt as well. I think that would be useful. But unfortunately, it just hasn't had the opportunity to do it since we've been over.